Do we need any more proof? Because I don't think so. The turning point's behind us. Gone are the days when basketball was historically American heritage. Because today, and maybe forever, we'll never see Team USA dominate as they did in the past. To win any FIBA tournament, they're gonna have to sweat. And we've seen enough precedents to think otherwise.
This is not 1992 anymore. Players are better all over the world, teams are better. It's not easy.
Now, I have some bad news for Team USA, because in reality, so far, only the European powerhouses have been able to put them on the ropes. It's true teams like Argentina, Brazil, or Australia have been immersed in the expansion process for years, or rather they've been going for decades, but there are many parts of the world that are still just waking up. Many continents where basketball's not yet finished exploding. And those are precisely the ones that pose a future threat to Team USA. Now, there's a continent that's already presenting its candidacy. It's not that basketball's new in Asia. In fact, I've already talked in a video about how China and the Philippines are among the few countries in the world where basketball's considered the leading sport. But apart from a few isolated cases, their basketball world was completely different from the Western world. Their players rarely left Asia to play overseas, except for exceptional cases like Yao Ming, and in turn, their domestic leagues were not attractive enough to attract talent from the West. But this isn't really the case anymore. There's a big market behind Asian basketball, or rather, behind Asian basketball, there's the biggest market in the world. 59% of the world's population lives on a single continent, and coincidentally, the best basketball product in the world is offered by the United States. So Asian fans have always been interested in the NBA, however they had to watch it at a distance. But everything changed with one player. Stephon Marbury was only 31 years old when he ended his NBA career. He was still young and he decided to go to a destination that was not very common among American players. Stephon decided to go to China. And from that moment on, he set a precedent that's been followed by other players whose career in the United States were coming to an end. The fact that Marbury became a star in the CBA and also managed to implant his product, the Starbury, in the Asian market has served as a reference for other stars to imitate. Andre Blatch in the Philippines, where he even competed with the country in FIBA competitions, Dwight Howard in Taiwan, where he now even owns a league, or Jeremy Lin in the CBA, where he became a superstar in Chinese basketball. Players are more aware than ever that the opportunities are there, not only to continue to compete at an increasingly high level, but to enter a market that'll eventually bring them millions of dollars. But this exodus of American basketball to the Eastern world has not only been the reason for the explosion of Asian basketball. More and more players are walking the same path, but in reverse. What do I mean by this? That there are many talented young players developed in Asia who end up reaching the elite of world basketball. In fact, in the last few years, as many as 6 Asian players have stepped foot on an NBA court. Filipino Jordan Clarkson was the first of his generation, a prospect who, although he was trained in the US, represented the Philippines in numerous international competitions. Moreover, his rise within the league after being drafted in the second round of the 2014 draft has been worthy of mention. But it's the next generation that comes loaded with talent. Rui Hachimura, the current Lakers forward, is one of the most important pieces of the purple and gold bench. Or Jalen Green, the Houston Rockets shooting guard who was selected in the second position of the 2021 draft and who during the second half of last season played at the best level of his career. Sharpshooter Yuta Watanabe is also one of them, although he's now headed to Japan, his home country, after 5 relatively successful seasons in the NBA. Also, the part Vietnamese Jalen Williams, not to be confused with Jalen, who's been part of the rotation of a team as powerful as the Oklahoma City Thunder all season long. And the most underrated, Johnny Juzang, who, despite not being part of the Utah Jazz rotation, shot almost 42% on three-pointers in the 20 games he played last season. However, they're not the only ones. Players like Yuki Kawamura, the 5'8" point guard of the Yokohama B Corsairs, who signed an Exhibit 10 contract to play the preseason with the Memphis Grizzlies, Keisei Tominaga, the 6'2" guard who averaged 15 points last season in a conference as tough as the Big Ten and who will play the preseason with the Indiana Pacers, or Kai Soto, the Filipino 7'3" phenom center that intends to join an NBA team, are examples that this process can no longer be stopped. But what's the real reason behind all this progress? Why has basketball developed so suddenly in countries where this culture was not so present? Or in other words, why are Asian countries producing more elite prospects than ever before? Well, we all know that money is the engine that moves the world, right? And indirectly, this has been the real and only reason. The NBA's constant effort to expand its borders has been going on for decades. In fact, we can trace its beginning to the enormous rivalry that Magic Johnson and Larry Bird carried over from college to the professional league. These two players, who also represented the two most iconic franchises in NBA history, were the first to take the American product beyond the borders of the United States. In 1984, French television broadcast a live finals game for the first time. Since then, the European public fell in love with the NBA. It was this rivalry that saved the league, exporting a product that was increasingly profitable outside the US soil. And when the league realized the importance of this foreign market, it sought to expand its profits. Today, the NBA is a globalized league that reaches every corner of the world. Its influence surpasses all the standards that a domestic league has had in virtually any sport. And the effects of this process are beginning to be felt in Asia as well. Earlier, I talked about how China is the exception, a country where basketball's always been really important. But as I also said, before the Marbury phenomenon, there were no real connection between the two markets. Now, today, there are a huge number of American players who established their second home there. Jahlil Okafor, Jared Sullinger, Maurice Spates, Marshawn Brooks, Sonny Weems, Ed Davis, Joseph Young, Eric Moreland, Dakari Johnson, Dominique Jones. The number of players who have chosen this destination after their NBA career is enormous. The salaries are good, the competitive level is getting better and better, and the CBA's become one of the most talented leagues in the world. Something similar to what's beginning to cook in the B League, a league in which we already dedicated a video a few weeks ago, in which we talked about the exponential growth of the Japanese competition. Cristiano Felicio, Josh Harrelson, Elise Johnson, James McAdoo, or Thomas Welsh are examples of that. Players who, even though they don't have as much reputation as those in the CBA, demonstrate the growing attractiveness of the league. And interestingly, this effect has also been present in the PBA, the Philippines domestic league, for a longer period of time. In addition to players like Rashad McCants, Quincy Miller, Terrence Williams, or Wayne Sheldon Jr., players from other decades like Rick Brunson or Mitchell Wiggins, fathers of Jalen and Andrew, also played in the PBA during their careers. And we can't forget Australia, which in the FIBA context counts as an Asian country for some reason, not sure why. It's not a new fact that the NBL's a league with a huge competitive level that, in addition, has pioneered programs. Of course, we're talking about the Next Stars program, a model that allows players who have finished high school in the United States to have an alternative to college basketball, in which they'll compete in a professional environment that also allows them to earn income for just playing ball. From LaMelo Ball to Alexander Sarr, through players like Ousmane Dieng, RJ Hampton, or the Australian Josh Giddey, the examples that have been part of this program are more and more prominent. So, if the leagues are better, they attract better players. If they attract better players, they develop better players, and the cycle just doesn't stop. So, as you've seen, we're in an era of expansion of Asian basketball. The cultural influence of basketball is so great around the world that we'll no longer miss prodigies who never discovered the sport. And little by little, we're going to see that gap between the US and the rest of the world get smaller and smaller. Now, as I said, Team USA still doesn't know that some of its main threats around the world have not yet finished exploding. And who knows if in a few years, or maybe a few decades, one of the Asian giants will become one of the best national teams in the world. Wouldn't that be cool?